there! You may call me Miss Introvert, and here on this channel we write, we edit, we learn, and we grow. Happy early Halloween! This is probably one of my favorite holidays of all time, and I thought we would celebrate with some poetry. If you're watching this on the day it's released, it's the day before Halloween, so that's why I'm saying that. Anyway, many of you know me as a writer, since I have a fantasy book coming out pretty soon called Among Dead Dragons, but I also love poetry. I read it, I write it, I think about it. A lot of you leave comments on previous poetry videos that I've done, and you ask questions about analyzing poetry, AP Lit exams, and how to write poetry just for fun, or how to read poetry. So a lot of my videos cover how to write, but this one will cover how to read poetry. And these methods are based on what I've learned in the classes I took while getting my bachelor's degree in English. I also got a bachelor's degree in writing, and I kind of combine different strategies that I've seen based on what I've done for reading poetry and the research I've done on reading poetry. More to the point, I'm going to be showing you guys how to analyze a poem. Number 1, structure. In one of my previous videos about reading poetry, I talked about the first step, the very first step, being reading the poem aloud. But as I said before, this is a video on how to analyze a poem. So we're going to be going even deeper into the steps. It's a given that you'd read it at this point. It's time to look at the structure. It's time to ask yourself some questions. If you're reading a poem with a purposeful structure, like a poem with rhyme and rhythm, what are you noticing about the iambs or the iambic meter? Is it a pentameter? How are the syllables stressed? How is the rhyme scheme formed? We're going to talk about all of that while we go through this spooky poem that I chose. There are so many different ways to structure a poem and to find the structure in a poem, which is half the fun of reading it. It's like putting together a creatively constructed puzzle. So put these things, these questions together, and you'll start to see the inner workings of how and why the poem makes sense and how and why it was written. Sometimes if you're a beginner at reading poetry, you're gonna look at a poem and be like, what am I reading? What does this have to do with this? Like, what? But once you get past the structure, you can start to ask those forming questions that are just scratching the surface of the poem. There is a lot that goes into the meaning of poems. It's not that they're like unsolvable riddles. There's like deep meaning inside the words. As an example, let's use Ulalume, which is a poem written by Edgar Allan Poe, and we're only going to be reading an excerpt of it. And you'll see what I mean when I say we're just scratching the surface. I hope I'm pronouncing Ulalume correctly. Let me look it up. Well, the internet says that it's pronounced Ulalume, so we'll follow the internet. Gen Z, everybody. No. Let's read the poem first. Ulalume by Edgar Allan Poe. The skies, they were ashen and sober. The leaves, they were crisped and sere. The leaves, they were withering and sere. It was night in the lonesome October of my most immemorial year. It was hard by the dim lake of Auber, in the misty mid-region of Weir. It was down by the dank tarn of Auber, in the ghoul-haunted woodland of Weir. Can you see as I'm reading it, there is a rhythm to it. There's da-da, 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 da-da. Do you hear that rhythm? That's where the iambic pentameter and tetrameter and all these different iambs come in. So let's first start with the stressed and unstressed syllables. So when I'm reading this, if I read it really slowly, it's kind of like you're reading out a song or a heartbeat, like ba-bum, ba-bum, ba-bum. So for the first line, it's the skies, they were ashen and sober. So we have 4 full stressed and unstressed syllables, and then we have 1 unstressed syllable at the end. So in other words, we have an iambic tetrameter, which means that we have 4 whole stressed and unstressed syllables, and there's 1 little syllable hanging on there. And the ending sound that we hear is burr, from sober. The next line, we have an iambic tetrameter again, with another syllable hanging on, which is the word sear. The same with the next line, but this time we have a whole iambic pentameter, which means that we have ba-bum, 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 ba-bum. We have all 5, and so on and so forth. So now we're going to look at the rhyme scheme and look at the sounds at the ends of the lines, or even the middle of the lines, that sound alike across the stanzas. So we've got at the end of the first line from sober. Let's call this line A. And we have sear and sear in the next 2 lines. We'll call these 2 B, since they rhyme together. No, if you're Edgar Allan Poe, you don't get points off for using the same word for a rhyme. Just let him cook. Also, at the end of the first seer, we get a dash, which usually means in poetry language that we're gonna pause. So we're gonna take a breath and then we're gonna move on, which as you saw while I was reading the poem originally, I took a breath. And we have another burr after October, so that's gonna be labeled A again, line A. So the first 4 lines that we have form this pattern, A, B, B, A, or ABBA. Okay, let's move on to the next set of lines. So we have the 5th line ending in year, like seer, so this is the B line again. Then we have auber, or burr, and this is going to be A again. Then weir, like seer, B, burr for A, and then weir again for B. So in total, we have A, B, B, A, B, A, B, A, B, or ABBA, BABBA, BAB. But this tells us about the rhyme scheme of the poem. And if you want to read the rest of the poem moving forward, feel free and look for more rhyming patterns. I have the website where all of these poems are linked in the description below. It's like best horror poetry or something. But let's move on to number 2 for now. We have a mix of iambic pentameter and tetrameter, and then we have a rhyme scheme that we've come up with, and we've written down our rhyme scheme, so we have that step down. Make sure you write those things down, because if you're like me, you're gonna forget. Number 2, literary elements. And if you don't know what those are, think back to the English classes you've taken or language art classes. You've got your similes, your metaphors, your hyperboles, your point of view or your speaker, your repetition, your personification, your alliteration, your assonance, your allusion, your onomatopoeia. I could go on. If you don't know what any of those are, take a quick refresher and maybe watch this helpful YouTube video. I didn't make it, someone else did. But let's look at another spooky poem and find those literary elements. This is an excerpt from a poem called The Highwayman. There's a song called The Highwayman in Over the Garden Wall, but this is different. It's by Alfred Noyes. So many excerpts. This is another excerpt, I know, but some poems can be long, and this video is not long enough for The Highwayman. But again, if you want to look at these poems and analyze them for yourself later, please do. Let's read it out loud. The wind was a torrent of darkness among the gusty trees. The moon was a ghostly galleon tossed upon cloudy seas. The road was a ribbon of moonlight over the purple moor, and the highwayman came riding, riding, riding. The highwayman came riding up to the old inn door. So if we look at the very beginning, we can see a number 1 or an I, indicating that this poem is split into parts, and this is the first part. Then we have a capitalized the or the. Remember that we don't know why it's important yet, we're just marking down that it's there. If you're reading this poem analytically aloud, though, you might pronounce the as the, like the wind was a torrent of darkness, just to mark in your head that this is a capitalized letter with emphasis. And right in that line, we have a metaphor. The wind was a torrent of darkness. Metaphors essentially assign descriptions more bluntly than similes. If this were a simile, it would say the wind was like a torrent of darkness. Metaphor here is stating that the wind is a torrent of darkness. This gives it a more foreboding and fearful presence, and it assigns meaning to it and an identity to it in a way. It's not personification. Through a personification, we would say that like maybe the wind blew until its lungs were empty. We're pretending that the wind is like the human body. That would be personification. This is a metaphor. The wind was a torrent of darkness. We have another metaphor. The moon was a ghostly galleon. Imagery. It gives us a picture of what's going on. Then we have the third line. The road was a ribbon of moonlight over the purple moor. Maybe we see a glowing road in front of us, or maybe we're talking from far away as the speaker. Are we the highwayman? Are we someone watching the highwayman coming up the road? We don't know. We have to keep reading. In the second line, we do have some hyperbole of the moon being tossed upon cloudy seas. I could see this being a description of the reflection of the moonlight in the water, like on the waves. Finally, we have repetition in lines 4 and 5. By repetition, I mean we're repeating a word several times. So the highwayman came riding, dash, remember we're taking a breath and pausing, riding, dash, riding, dash. So we've got that long sequence of riding, which kind of gives us a feeling of suspense. And if you want to read this poem aloud, some kind of poetry-themed event where you're reciting poetry, you might change your tone a little when you're speaking the word riding. So riding, 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 to like give that feeling of suspense. But since we have this repetition, we start forming questions in our minds, like where's this highwayman riding to? Just get to the point. I'm scared. And then we find out in line 6 that the highwayman came riding up to the olden door. Just in those 6 lines, we can take so much away, and it's that easy if you look for those literary elements. But now we're going to move on to the 3rd step, in which we're going to combine our structure and our literary elements, which is number 3, meaning. And I know you guys are dying to find out what the meaning is for the first 2 poems that we did, but we're going to use a smaller poem to combine those 2 things. So we're going to do Thinkin by Michael R. Birch. This is a shorter poem since I wanted to keep things short for this last segment, but let's read it aloud together. Skeleton, tell us what you lack. The ability to love, your flesh so slack. Will we frighten you, grown as pale and unsound, when we also haunt the unhallowed ground? For this one, I wanted to focus on keeping the poem short so that we could put the 2 steps together from before. So let's start with step 1 and look at the structure. We've got some very short lines, like skeleton is just 1 word in the line. For this poem, I'm not focusing too much on I am. We can form a rhyming structure. Every 2nd and 4th line of both stanzas has a rhyme: black, slack, unsound, and ground. So our structure is A with ton, skeleton, B with lack, and then C with love, and then B with slack again. Moving on to stanza 2, we're assigning a new letter to a new rhyme. U is D, sound is E, haunt is F, and ground is E again. So we have A, B, C, B, D, E, F, E. You're letting yourself know which sounds are assigned to which letter and which ones match in each stanza. Let's look at step 2 now, since we've kind of looked at our structure, the aspects of the literary elements. Speaker is waking us up a little bit with that first line, ending in an exclamation mark, and then it quiets with an ellipsis in the 2nd line. So the poem kind of quiets from here on out, but we have some little interview questions for this skeleton. He questions if the skeleton lacks the ability to love, or if he feels bad that he doesn't have actual flesh. Does having flesh constitute love? I mean, in one sense, yes. Then he asks a new question in the 2nd stanza. Will we frighten you? Putting emphasis on we and you. Since skeletons are known to be frightful in scary stories and sometimes in pop culture, Halloween, he challenges the opposite question. It's kind of like saying that bugs are more afraid of us than we are of them. If skeletons are like sentient beings, are they afraid of us while we're afraid of them? Then he describes we as pale, and he goes into some imagery of pale and unsound, describing what these skeletons are afraid of, which is essentially us, living beings, when we also haunt, as in we are the ghosts trespassing on the skeletons present, maybe a graveyard or a morgue. Where are the hauntings happening? On hallowed ground. So the speaker uses a mix of juxtaposition between the haunting of humans to skeletons, and he, in a way, interviews the skeleton. Even the title defines something as kin, whether it's us as kin to the skeletons or skeletons as kin to us, meaning the dead and living are still kin, but one of them is thin, or both of them are thin, because we both groups have a skeleton in them. I have a skeleton, I'm a human being. We're all going to be only skeletons one day, unless we blow up or something, or we get cremated. The thought of that in and of itself can make skeletons scary. And you can think of the living as the haunting memories of these skeletons, of these personified skeletons. You can tell that the tone of the poem is a little dark. There's also some levity to it, enough to make you laugh to yourself a little bit, because we are in a way questioning ourselves, because we'll all be skeletons one day. This reminds me of the episode of Over the Garden Wall. There's so much poetic imagery in Over the Garden Wall, you know what I mean? The 2nd episode where they find out the pumpkin cult, they're all just skeletons that put on pumpkin bodies. This reminds me of that episode. But yeah, anyway, after that tangent, that's just a little bit about analyzing poetry. That last one was a short poem, but obviously there's a lot going on in just 2 stanzas, meaning there is so much more you can do with a longer poem. And this is just my experience and also what I've learned. You can take it or leave it. It's helped the teachers and mentors that have taught me about poetry, and I hope it's helped you as well. Don't forget to subscribe, make sure that you like this video, and leave a comment on some of your favorite spooky poetry. Don't forget that my book is coming out, Among Dead Dragons. Pen name is Lainey Dove and will be on Amazon. Thank you for watching. Okay, bye.